Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let us return to our main character. The rain was soft that morning, a steady whisper against the glass of a downtown law office, the kind of gray light that makes everything look honest, even heartbreak. Inside, two people sat across a long mahogany table, once husband and wife, now strangers bound by a single document. Emma Parker's hands trembled slightly as she turned the final page. The words blurred for a second before she steadied her breath. Across from her, Liam Parker watched quietly, his expression unreadable, the gold of his wedding band already gone from his hand. Between them lay the contract, not a marriage certificate this time, but a 30-day agreement. 30 days to live together like they once did, 30 days before signing the divorce papers that would make their separation official. Emma broke the silence first. Just 30 days, she said, her voice low but firm. After that, we end this. Gracefully. Liam nodded once, though something flickered behind his calm eyes, something that did not quite agree. 30 days, he repeated, if that is what you need. Her fingers brushed the pen. She hesitated, then signed. The sound of ink scratching against paper felt louder than the rain outside. When she pushed the document across the table, his hand paused before taking it. The air between them seemed to thicken heavy with things unsaid. A small antique clock on the sideboard ticked softly, marking the moment. 30 days left. The clock would later sit on their kitchen counter, counting down to the day they would say goodbye, or not. The lawyer cleared his throat, gathering the papers. I will file this after 30 days, he said gently, as though afraid to disturb the fragile air. Liam rose first, buttoning his coat with the precision of a man who lived by control. Emma followed, clutching her purse close to her chest. They left the office side by side, walking in silence down the marble hallway. Their reflections moved together in the tall windows, two people who used to know every heartbeat of each other, now reduced to polite distance. Outside, the rain had eased, leaving the city damp and glistening. Liam opened his umbrella, the gesture automatic, the same way he used to without thinking. He held it out for her. She hesitated, then stepped under it. The space beneath was small, the silence even smaller. For a brief second, the smell of his cologne, the warmth of his shoulder pulled her back into a memory before the grief, before the distance, before their hearts learned to hide. But the moment passed. She stepped aside as a cab pulled up. See you at home, she said softly. He nodded, eyes following her, until the yellow cab turned the corner and disappeared into the mist. Only then did he exhale, his breath visible in the cold air. Inside the cab, Emma stared out the window. Her reflection in the glass looked foreign, tired, older, yet determined. The rain streaked down the glass like unfinished tears. She whispered to herself, just 30 days, Emma. You can survive 30 days. The driver glanced at her through the rearview mirror, as if he wanted to ask if she was all right. But he did not. Some silences are sacred. The city rolled by, gray and endless. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled, a low warning that change was coming, whether she was ready or not. At the red light, Emma looked down at the folded contract in her lap, her name beside his printed in black and white. A story that began with a promise of forever, now reduced to a countdown. Yet something deep inside whispered that maybe this was not the end. Maybe buried beneath the ashes of routine and regret, there was still one spark left waiting to breathe. If only 30 days were enough to find it. If you have ever wondered whether love can survive time, silence, and pride, stay with me. Because this is not a story about falling in love. It is a story about finding it again. Now, let us go back to her, the woman who signed the final contract. Emma Parker. The house was too quiet when Emma returned. Every sound seemed amplified, the click of the door latch, the echo of her heels on the wooden floor, the sigh of air from the vents. Once this home had been filled with laughter music, the smell of burnt toast on Saturday mornings. Now it felt like a museum of memories, carefully arranged and untouched. She set her purse down on the kitchen counter and paused. The antique clock Liam had placed there ticked softly, its brass hands pointing to day one. She stared at it for a long moment, as if waiting for it to stop. It did not. She walked through the living room, her fingers tracing the back of the couch, the piano lid to the edge of a picture frame that still held their wedding photo. It was taken on a sunny afternoon in Central Park. Liam had been laughing, the kind of laugh that came from deep inside. She had leaned into him, her veil brushing his cheek. They looked real, not perfect, just honest. That honesty had disappeared somewhere along the way. Maybe it was the year he started his company and began sleeping at the office. Maybe it was when she stopped waiting up. Or maybe it was the night she lost their baby, and neither of them knew how to speak about it. The silence that followed had been louder than any fight. Emma sat on the couch and pulled a sketchbook from under the coffee table. The pages were filled with half-finished designs, her dream projects as an architect. Buildings that would hold light differently, spaces that could breathe. But none of them had been built. She had given up her own firm 3 years ago when Liam's empire took off. At first she was proud of him. Then quietly she began to disappear behind his success. A door opened upstairs. Heavy steps. Liam appeared at the top of the staircase. His tie loosened, the reins still clinging to his coat. He looked at her as though she were someone he once met but could not remember where. "You are home early," he said. "So are you." He gave a faint nod and hung his coat. "The lawyer will deliver a copy tomorrow. I wanted to make sure you were all right." She laughed once, small and dry. "After everything, you are still checking in like a meeting reminder." He paused. "I am trying, Emma." She closed the sketchbook. "Trying what, Liam, to fix something you already decided was broken." His eyes flickered. "We both decided." "Did we?" she asked, standing. "Because I remember waiting for you night after night, eating dinner alone, pretending it was fine. I remember losing our child and watching you go back to work the next morning, like nothing happened." He looked down, his jaw tight. "I did not know how to help. I thought you needed space." "I needed you," she said, voice cracking. "But you built walls around yourself and I stopped knocking." For a long time, neither spoke. The rain outside returned, tapping gently on the windows like someone trying to get in. Finally, he exhaled. "That is why I agreed to this. The 30 days. Maybe we can live together like nothing happened," she interrupted. "Pretend for a month and call it closure." He met her eyes. "Pretend, yes. But maybe if we remember how to be kind again, we might also remember how to breathe in the same room." His words hung between them, soft but sincere. She wanted to believe him. Part of her still did. After he went upstairs, Emma wandered back to the kitchen. The clock now read 11:42 p.m. and day 1. She leaned against the counter, arms folded, staring at the ticking hands. The sound was steady, like a heartbeat she was afraid to trust. When she finally turned off the lights, she whispered into the dark, 30 days, Liam. Let us see if time can heal what we destroyed. Upstairs in his study, Liam sat by the window watching her silhouette move through the house. He wanted to go down to tell her everything he had never said, the regrets, the fear, the diagnosis that had changed everything. But not yet. He placed his hand over his chest, feeling the faint flutter of his heart, and whispered to himself, 30 days to make her remember why she ever loved me. Outside, lightning flashed across the skyline, painting the city in silver for a brief, fragile second, like a promise that light still existed, even after the storm. And somewhere in that house, 2 hearts that had once beat in rhythm began to search for it again. Now let us stay with him, Liam Parker, the man who thought he had everything, except the one thing he truly needed. Morning sunlight spilled through the kitchen blinds, cutting across the marble counter like gold threads. The clock on the counter now read day 2. The house smelled faintly of coffee and quiet tension. Liam stood by the sink, sleeves rolled up, trying to make breakfast. The skillet hissed as eggs burned at the edges, curling like paper. He stared at them, lost in thought, until a voice behind him said softly, "You were never good at cooking." He turned. Emma stood in the doorway, hair tied back loosely, wearing one of his old shirts. It hung too big on her shoulders. For a moment, the sight of her like that, so familiar, so out of reach, made his heart ache. I am trying to remember how he said. She moved past him, grabbed another pan, and started over. Maybe start with turning down the heat. They worked side by side in silence at first. The rhythm was awkward. 2 people who used to know every step but had forgotten the dance. When she reached for the salt, her hand brushed his. Both froze, then pretended not to notice. After a few minutes, she spoke. We should set rules. If we are going to do this 30-day thing, it needs structure. He glanced at her. Rules, yes, she said, plating the eggs neatly. Boundaries, expectations. You are a businessman, you understand contracts. A faint smile tugged at his lips. All right, what do you propose? She thought for a moment. Rule number 1, no talking about the past. Not about what went wrong, not about what we lost. His jaw tightened, but he nodded. Fair. Rule number 2, we eat dinner together every night. No work excuses, agreed. She hesitated before adding the third. And each day we write one line in the memory book, something we are thankful for. He looked at her surprised. Thankful, she shrugged. Even if it is small, gratitude makes distance harder to keep. Liam considered her words. Then without warning, he said, Rule number 4, if one of us starts to feel something again, we do not hide it. Her eyes lifted to his. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then she said quietly, That will not happen. He smiled, but it was the kind of smile that hides hope. We will see. The rest of the day passed in fragments. She worked at the kitchen table, sketching designs for a community library project she had once abandoned. He watched her from the hallway, admiring the way her brow furrowed when she focused. At lunch, she caught him looking. You have meetings, do you not? Not today. You always have meetings. He folded his arms. Maybe I have better things to do. The remark startled her. It was almost tender. Almost. That evening, they ate dinner in the glow of the pendant lights. It felt civilized, almost normal, until a question slipped out before she could stop it. Do you ever think about what it would have been like? If we had not lost the baby, silence fell like glass shattering. Liam's fork stopped midair. His voice when it came was quiet. That is against rule number 1. She blinked hard, fighting tears. You are right. He reached across the table, hesitated, then pulled his hand back. Emma, do not, she said, standing abruptly. She left the room, the soft click of her footsteps fading up the stairs. Liam sat alone, staring at the untouched plate. He wanted to follow her to hold her, but he stayed. Some distances could not be crossed by will alone. Later that night, when the house was dark, he walked past her studio. The door was slightly open. Inside, she was asleep, at her desk pen, still in hand, the memory book open beside her. He stepped closer. On the first page in her neat handwriting, she had written Day 1. Thank you for still making coffee, even when it tastes terrible. A quiet laugh escaped him. He picked up the pen and wrote underneath it, Day 2. Thank you for staying. He placed the pen down gently and turned off the light. In his study, he sat by the window staring at the city skyline. The night was calm, but inside him, a storm had begun. The more time he spent with her, the more he realized how much he had missed her voice, her honesty, her quiet strength. But love was not enough before, and he was not sure if it would be enough now. Still, as the clock struck midnight, the brass hands shifted to Day 3, and Liam whispered into the dark one line, a day. Maybe that is how we find our way back. Now let us return to Emma Parker, who still believed her heart had learned how to stop hoping. By the 5th day, the silence between them had changed. It was no longer sharp. It had softened into something watchful, like two people listening for a song that they once knew by heart. Emma's mornings began earlier now. She would wake before sunrise, make a coffee, and sit by the window sketching the new library design. The quiet hours gave her peace, though she could feel Liam's presence in the house like a hum under the walls. He moved gently, always trying not to disturb her. Sometimes she caught him watching from the doorway, eyes tracing her drawings, the way they used to trace her face. That evening, they ate together, as their contract required. The dinner table had become a fragile bridge, one they both pretended not to fear crossing. Liam poured wine. Emma lit a candle. The small flame flickered between them. You are getting better at cooking, she said, cutting into the grilled salmon he had made. I have been practicing, he replied, smiling, faintly. You once said, a meal is not about taste, it is about care. She looked up, surprised, he remembered. You were listening back then always, he said. I just stopped showing it. Her hand trembled slightly, and she hid it by setting down her fork. He noticed but said nothing. Instead, he reached for the small notebook on the counter. The memory book. Shall we? He asked. She nodded. On her page she wrote, Day 5. Thank you for remembering the small things. He wrote beneath it, Day 5. Thank you for forgiving the small things. Later, as they cleaned the table, a laugh escaped her, a sound so sudden it startled them both. Do you remember our first apartment? She said. The one above the bakery. Liam's face softened. The walls smelled like cinnamon every morning. And you hated it. I did not hate it, he corrected gently. I just never told you I liked it. I was too focused on building something bigger. I thought success would make you proud. I was proud, she whispered, until success took you away. The silence returned, not cruel but heavy. He wanted to apologize, to tell her that every late night at the office had been an act of fear, not ambition. Fear that he was not enough for the woman who dreamed in blueprints and skylines. But before he could speak, her phone buzzed. She excused herself, walking to the living room to take the call. Liam stayed in the kitchen, staring at the empty chair she left behind. The candle had burned low wax, spilling down like frozen tears. When she returned, she looked shaken. It was Dr. Bennett. My mother's condition is getting worse. Liam straightened. Do you need money for her treatment? You know I can. No, she cut in quickly. That is not what this is about. I will handle it. He nodded slowly. You do not have to handle everything alone anymore, Emma. She forced a smile. We both know this is temporary. That night she sat on the edge of the bed in the guest room, scrolling through photos of her mother's old garden. The flowers had once been her mother's joy, but now the hospital had replaced the soil. Emma's throat tightened. She wanted to call Liam to lean on him, but the rules she had written bound her own heart. Down the hall, Liam sat awake, replaying her words. Temporary. It echoed through his mind like a clock striking over and over. He opened his laptop, scrolling through messages from his board of directors, doctors, and lawyers. His company wanted answers. His physician wanted results. But all he wanted was time he was not sure he had left. The next morning, Emma found him asleep at his desk, glasses still on papers scattered like fallen leaves. She noticed the small prescription bottle half hidden under the stack. Heart medication. Her chest tightened, but she said nothing. She gently draped a blanket over his shoulders. He stirred, mumbling her name, but she stepped back before he opened his eyes. For a moment she looked at him, at the tired lines near his mouth, the faint gray in his hair, the man who had once promised forever. In that moment she realized something terrifying. The routine they had built, the dinners, the gratitude notes, the quiet mornings, was not healing old wounds. It was uncovering them. And maybe that was the point. When he woke later, the first thing he saw was the blanket and a note she had left on the desk. Day 6. Thank you for trying. He smiled softly, touching the edge of the paper. For the first time in months, his heart did not hurt as much. But he also knew that every day they spent together brought him closer to the truth he was still hiding. Now let us return to him, Liam Parker, a man counting down, not just to goodbye, but to the day his heart might stop before he can say what it truly feels. By the 10th day, the house felt different. The air was warmer, the spaces between them smaller. It was not love, not yet, but something fragile and familiar, like a song they could almost remember. That morning, Emma found fresh lilies in a vase on the counter. A small card leaned beside them, written in Liam's neat handwriting. Day 10. Thank you for bringing light back into this house. She smiled despite herself. He had never been the type to leave notes. She wondered if this was part of the contract or something real, something that slipped past his control. He was in the backyard when she found him, sleeves rolled, trimming the old rose bushes she had once planted. You are gardening now, she asked, half amused. He looked up, the sun glinting on his hair. You always said I should spend more time outside. I am just 10 years late taking your advice. She laughed softly. At least you are finally listening. Maybe I am finally ready to. His tone was gentle, but there was a quiet ache in it. That evening, they prepared for a charity gala hosted by his company. It was part of the agreement, 5 public events where they would appear as a couple. Emma hesitated when she saw her reflection in the mirror. The dress was elegant navy blue silk that shimmered when she moved. Liam entered the room and stopped for a heartbeat, his breath caught. You look... He trailed off, unable to finish. She turned to face him, unsure how to respond. We should go, she said instead. At the gala, flashes from cameras burst like small storms of light. The room was filled with investors, executives, and old friends. Liam held her hand for the photos, the warmth of his palm steady against hers. To everyone else, they looked perfect, a success story, a power couple reborn. But inside, both knew how thin that illusion was. When the speeches began, Emma slipped to a quiet corner near the balcony away from the chatter. She leaned on the railing, breathing in the cool night air. Behind her, a voice said, "You always hated these things." Liam joined her, holding 2 glasses of champagne. He offered one to her. "You would rather be home sketching. You remember that." "I remember everything," he said softly, "even the things I wish I could forget." She turned to face him. The city lights reflected in his eyes, and for the first time in years, she saw the man she had fallen in love with, the dreamer, not the businessman. "Then why did you stop fighting for us?" she asked. He hesitated. "Because I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of losing everything I worked for, of losing control, of watching you look at me and see someone who failed you." He took a shaky breath. "And I did fail you, Emma. I know that now." Her throat tightened. "You never needed to be perfect, Liam. You just needed to be there." He nodded, his voice low. "I am here now." For a long moment neither moved. The air between them shimmered with everything they could not say. Then someone called his name from inside, breaking the spell. He turned toward the noise, but before he could go, she said quietly, "Liam, do you ever wish we could start over?" He met her eyes. Every day. When they returned to the ballroom, a reporter stopped them for a photo. "Mr. Parker." "Mrs. Parker, can we have one smile for the foundation?" They posed together, smiling for the camera. The flash went off, and in that split second she felt his hand tighten around hers. It was not for the photo. It was real. Later that night, back at the house, she found a new line in the memory book. Day 10. "Thank you for standing beside me even when I did not deserve it." She held the pen for a long time before writing beneath it, Day 10. "Thank you for remembering how to see me." Before she closed the notebook, she noticed the faint outline of another page beneath his entry. The ink had bled through, slightly revealing part of a sentence. "The doctor says it is getting worse." Her pulse quickened. She flipped the page but stopped halfway. Something inside her whispered, "Not yet. Not tonight." Down the hall, Liam was in his study staring at his phone screen, the latest message from his cardiologist unread. He closed his eyes and pressed a hand to his chest, feeling the rhythm falter for a moment before it steadied again. In the silence of the house, the clock ticked, softly shifting to day 11. Outside, the wind carried the scent of rain, and inside, 2 hearts that had forgotten how to speak were beginning slowly to remember. Now let us return to her Emma Parker, who was about to learn that every truth she feared had been waiting quietly just beneath the surface of their 30 days. The next morning arrived with a pale gray sky and the smell of rain still hanging in the air. Emma woke to the quiet hum of the city outside and the faint sound of Liam moving around downstairs. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine this was just an ordinary morning, that nothing had ever gone wrong between them. But the thought vanished as quickly as it came. Reality had a way of reminding her that they were living on borrowed time, 30 days to pretend 30 days to let go. When she came down to the kitchen, he was making coffee. His back turned to her. The morning light caught the edges of his hair, the first strands of gray more visible now. He looked older, gentler, but there was something fragile in the way he held himself, as if he were afraid that one wrong move would make everything crumble. "You are up early," she said softly. He turned with a small smile. "Could not sleep. The rain kept me awake." She poured herself a cup and leaned against the counter. "You used to love the sound of rain." "I still do," he said. "It just sounds different now." They stood there for a while, not speaking, listening to the quiet tick of the kitchen clock. The air between them felt almost peaceful until she noticed the small prescription bottle on the table. The label faced her this time. It was his name. Her stomach tightened. Liam. What is this? He froze, following her gaze. For a moment he looked like he might lie. Then he exhaled. "It is nothing serious." Her eyes narrowed. "Do not say that. You are taking heart medication." He set down his cup, his voice calm but heavy. "It is just a precaution. My doctor says the condition is manageable." Condition, she repeated, her voice rising. How long? He hesitated. A year, maybe a little longer. Emma stared at him stunned. You were sick, all this time, and you did not tell me. I did not want your pity, he said, and by the time I was ready to talk, we were already too far apart. Her hands trembled as she placed the bottle down. So, what is this contract then? 30 days to ease your guilt before you disappear? No, he said quickly, stepping closer. It was 30 days to make things right, to leave you with something other than anger. Her throat tightened. You think this makes it right? That you can fix years of silence with flowers and dinners? His voice cracked for the first time. I was dying, Emma. Not just from this, from everything I let die between us. I wanted to give you something before I ran out of time. She backed away, her heart pounding. You do not get to decide when I say goodbye. He reached for her, but she moved past him, grabbing her coat. I need air, she said, her voice shaking. Emma, please. But she was already out the door, the sound of her footsteps fading against the wet pavement. Outside, the rain had returned light and relentless. She walked without direction past the familiar cafe they once loved, past a small bookstore where he used to wait for her after work. Every corner held a memory. Every drop of rain felt like the echo of something she had lost. By the time she reached the park, her clothes were soaked, her hands cold. She sat on a bench under an old oak tree, pressing her palms together as if prayer could steady her. Why did you not tell me sooner? She whispered, her voice breaking. Why did you always carry everything alone? She stayed there until the rain slowed. When she finally returned home, Liam was waiting by the window, his face pale, his eyes red from worry. I thought he began, but she cut him off. You do not get to do this alone anymore, she said. If you are sick, we face it together. He shook his head slowly. Emma, you deserve a future, not a farewell. She stepped closer, her voice trembling but steady. Then stop writing our ending before it happens. He looked at her for a long moment, the weight of his secret now shared between them. I am scared, he admitted. So am I, she said. But fear is not love, Liam. It is just what keeps us from it. That night, neither of them slept. The clock ticked toward day 12, each second louder than the last. In the darkness, Liam stared at the ceiling, his heart unsteady beneath his ribs. Beside him, Emma's breathing was soft, but he could feel her hand resting over his, grounding him, reminding him that despite everything, he was not alone. For the first time in years, he let himself believe that maybe love did not end when time ran out. Maybe it began again when two people stopped pretending it was already gone. Now let us stay with him, Liam Parker, a man standing between fear and faith, learning that the heart does not stop loving just because it is breaking. By the 20th day, the rhythm they had built began to falter. The dinners, the memory notes, the quiet routines, all of it felt heavier, as if every tender moment came with the shadow of an ending. The truth about Liam's illness lingered in every corner of the house like a scent that would not fade. Emma tried to keep things normal. She worked in her studio, filled the house with music, and even convinced him to take short walks in the park again. But each time she saw him press a hand to his chest, pretending it was nothing, her heart twisted with fear. One evening, she found him sitting alone on the back porch, staring at the city lights. His face looked calm, almost peaceful, but there was a pale sheen of sweat on his forehead. She knelt beside him. Liam, you need to rest. He smiled faintly. I am fine. Do not lie to me anymore, she said softly. He looked at her, then the mask slipping. I just do not want you to see me like this. Weak, fading. Her eyes filled with tears. You think this is weakness, trying to protect me even when it hurts you? That is love, Liam, but love also means letting me stay. He lowered his gaze voice barely above a whisper. I do not know how to let someone stay when everything inside me is leaving. She took his hand, pressing it to her chest. Then, borrow my strength until you remember yours. For a moment, neither of them moved. The air felt charged with something fragile and fierce at once, but before he could answer, his phone buzzed on the table. It was an alert from his company, a board meeting emergency notice. He sighed. I have to handle this. Emma stood, disbelief flooding her voice. You cannot be serious. You can barely stand. It will only take an hour, he said. If I do not show up, they will replace me. Maybe they should, she snapped. You keep fighting for everything except your own life. His expression hardened. This company is everything I built. And what about us? She demanded. What about what we built? The argument cut through the quiet night like thunder. For a second, the world seemed to stop. Then without another word, Liam turned and walked back inside, leaving her standing in the cold. Hours later, when he returned from the office, the house was dark. On the counter lay the memory book open to a blank page. She had not written that day. Instead, a single note rested beside it in her handwriting. Day 20. I am tired of pretending time is on our side. Liam read the words over and over, his chest tightening until he had to grip the counter to steady himself. The pain came sharp and sudden this time, forcing him to his knees. He reached for the phone, but before he could dial, the wave passed, leaving him breathless and shaking. He sat on the floor, the ticking of the clock echoing through the silence. Day 21 had begun. Upstairs, Emma lay awake, staring at the ceiling, tears slipping quietly into her pillow. She wanted to run to him to take it all back, but pride and fear held her still. Neither knew it, but that night marked the turning point, the moment when love, truth, and time would finally collide. Now let us return to her Emma Parker, the woman who would soon learn that sometimes heartbreak is not the end of a love story, but the moment it finally becomes real. The rain returned on the 30th morning, soft and steady, the same way it had fallen on the day they signed the contract. The house was quiet except for the slow ticking of the antique clock on the counter. The brass hands pointed to day 30, the last day. Emma woke early, the ache of restless sleep still heavy behind her eyes. The guest room felt colder than usual, or maybe it was just the weight in her chest. She reached for the memory book on the nightstand. Its pages were nearly full now, lines of gratitude and sorrow written in two different handwritings, two broken hearts trying to remember how to beat together again. She turned to the last page. It was blank, waiting. She picked up the pen, hesitated, then closed the cover instead. Some words did not belong on paper. When she stepped into the kitchen, Liam was not there. His coffee mug sat untouched, a thin line of steam fading into the morning light. On the table, he had left a note. Come find me. One last memory. Her pulse quickened. She grabbed her coat and ran outside. The rain kissed her face, cool and familiar. The city blurred around her as she took the path toward the old lake house, the one they had built together before everything fell apart. When she arrived, the place looked almost exactly as she remembered, dusty, but whole, as if time had been waiting for them. Inside, candles flickered along the wooden beams. And there he was standing by the window, rainlight painting his face in silver. You remembered, she said, breathless. I never forgot, he replied. This was where we began. It felt right to end it here. She shook her head. Do not say end. He smiled softly, weary but calm. Emma, there are things I cannot control anymore, but I wanted you to know that these 30 days were the best gift I could have asked for. Her eyes filled with tears. Then ask for more. Fight for more. He reached for her hand, pressing it to his heart. I am fighting, just not the way you think. I am fighting to give you peace. The clock on the mantel chimed once. The sound seemed to echo forever. Do you remember what you said the day we moved in? He asked. You said love is not about permanence. It is about presence. She swallowed hard. Then stay present. Stay with me. He smiled faintly. I am here. Right now, I'm exactly where I want to be. For a long moment, neither spoke. The rain outside softened to a whisper. Then, without thinking, she kissed him. It was not desperate or perfect, it was quiet and real. When she pulled away, she saw tears on his cheeks, and her own mirrored them. He placed something in her palm. It was a folded piece of paper, their signed contract now torn in half. No more terms, as he said, no more endings. Her breath hitched. Liam. But his eyes were closing, his body swaying slightly. She caught him as he fell against her, his pulse faint but steady. Panic surged through her. Liam, stay with me. He stirred weakly, his voice barely a whisper. If love had a deadline, I would still choose you. She held him close, sobbing, her tears falling into his hair. Outside, the storm finally broke apart and sunlight began to filter through the clouds. She could hear the distant sound of sirens approaching, But in that moment, all she could feel was the warmth of his hand still in hers. The clock struck noon, the end of their 30 days. Now let us return to her Emma Parker, the woman who would soon discover that even when time runs out, love has a way of finding one more heartbeat. Sunlight poured through the hospital blinds, soft and golden, washing everything in a calm that did not feel real. Machines beeped steadily in the corner, the rhythm of a fragile heart refusing to give up. Emma sat beside the bed, her fingers entwined with Liam's. It had been 3 days since the lake house. 3 days since the doctor said he had made it through the worst. He looked pale but alive, his breathing steady. When his eyes opened, she smiled through the tears that came instantly. "You scared me," she whispered. He tried to speak, but his voice came weak and hoarse. "I promised." 30 days, he said with a faint grin. "I could not break my last contract." She laughed softly, brushing a hand through his hair. "There are no more contracts, no more deadlines." He turned his head toward her, his eyes full of something gentle and certain. "Then what are we now?" She leaned closer. "We are the clause that never expires." For a moment neither said anything more. The silence was filled with the steady hum of life returning, the sound of rain easing against the glass. Weeks later, the house felt alive again. The antique clock still ticked on the counter, but its hands no longer marked endings. They marked beginnings. Emma had reopened her architecture studio this time, in the converted attic space of their home. She called it memory architecture. On the wall above her desk hung a framed page torn from the memory book, Day 30. Love needs no contract. Liam worked beside her most days, slower now, more careful, learning to live without rushing toward success. Sometimes she would catch him staring at her, as if memorizing the way she looked when she was happy. "What are you thinking?" she would ask. "That I wasted so much time building empires when I already had a home," he would say. Their love did not look like it used to. It was quieter, simpler, more deliberate. The grand gestures had been replaced by morning coffee shared on the porch, by handwritten notes tucked into sketchbooks, by the comfort of silence that no longer hurt. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, he led her into the garden. The rose bushes she had once planted were blooming again. In the middle of the garden stood a small wooden sign carved with words that made her breath catch. For Emma, no terms, no endings, just love. He took her hand, slipping a ring onto her finger, one different from the first. "This time," he said softly, "no lawyers, no signatures, just a promise." Tears blurred her vision as she whispered, "Forever." He smiled. "Forever, however long forever wants to be." They stood together under the fading light, the clock in the kitchen ticking quietly. Inside, no longer counting down, just keeping time with two hearts that had finally learned how to beat together again. Sometimes life offers no rewrites, no second chances. But every now and then, love finds the courage to return, not to start over, but to continue. Because the truest stories are not the ones that begin perfectly. They are the ones that choose to keep going. If you believe that love can outlast time, say yes in your heart. And remember, what matters most is not how long you have, but how deeply you love while you still can. Now let us leave them there. Liam and Emma Parker, two souls who prove that even after goodbye, love can still find its way home.